I know these videos are old and I might be blind, but a video going over how to adjust nutrient ratios for water sources like spring water or tap water would be awesome. And I think that's actually a really great suggestion. Thank you so much. So, to do this properly, to be able to use any water source, because that's really, I think, the key question you're asking is how do I use any water source with the fertilizer I'm using, right? And how to do it is you have to treat the water, plain and simple. You have to treat the water with drops balance. You want to use your tap water to make it work with your plants, you have to treat it with drops balance. There's so many good things in tap water that over the years I've taught people how to use their tap water or use the river water or well water or rainwater or whatever water source they're getting. What they have to understand is they have to understand their input, parts per million. If they understand that, they'll be able to work with their soil biology. And so the key to understanding is you don't want to add more than 800 or 900 parts per million of known synthetic fertilizers. So what do I mean by synthetic fertilizers? Well, synthetic means man-made. It means altered by man, right? So drops balance is synthetic because it's been altered, right? If you don't get a rock and put it in the soil, then it's synthetic. Jesus, even harvesting the soil out of the ground and putting it in a bag could be even looked at as potentially synthetic because it was semi-altered from its original organic state. But when I talk about using synthetic, defining that, I mean chemical fertilizer, right? Chemical fertilizer that's not come derived from a sulfated mineral. So knowing that you can use any water source like tap if you treat the water, but you got to know the parts per million. So if your parts per million of your tap water is coming out and it's 1,500 parts per million, then what I would do is I would treat that water probably with a higher ratio of drops balance. You're going to have to work with it, probably at a 2 ml per gallon ratio, maybe even a 3 ml per gallon ratio. You might have a settling tank and top off the water from the top and allow the inert material to settle out of the water. That's going to take a little bit longer process, but you're going to clean your water. Will your parts per million change? They're not going to change, but the chemistry in your water is going to change. And the available nutrients in your tap water will become readily available. And personally, at that point, I would just use your tap water and water your plants and throw in some dry amendments, obviously into your soil, and see how much more you need to add. I'd throw in a biology product, but your tap water might actually have enough in there, depending upon what it is, but it might have enough in there. You might have to add some langbeinite, a little bit of dry amendments, and some small stuff, but just to allow there to be some diversity. But in that tap water, there might be enough in there to produce a healthy plant at some level because you're adding in the trace minerals, you're adding in some biology to break some stuff down. Biology will actually utilize whatever resource it has to grow. And as long as you don't have your pH all crazy in your tap water and you're making the nutrients available of whatever those parts per million are in there, well, then I would just, like I said, use that tap water and see how far that goes after you treat it because you've gotten rid of the heavy metals, you've gotten rid of all the toxins that end up screwing up the plant's growing cycle. And I'd go from there. So that same recommendation would be for rainwater, well water, all those things. Like know your initial starting parts per million. If it's super low, around 100, 200 parts per million, well, again, treat it with drops balance at 1 ml per gallon. Then at that point, if you're using a synthetic fertilizer, you have the ability to add up to 600 mLs of your synthetic fertilizer to that water to take it up to around 900 parts per million. And then I would also make sure to be adding in a biology product because what you're doing is you're utilizing the available nutrients in your tap water. Then you're adding in additional parts per million to the point where your biology is going to still keep doing what it needs to do without shutting it down. Once you shut down and you go past that 8 to 900 parts per million, you really start to need to dedicate yourself to understanding the additional fertilizers you're putting in. And you got to understand about drybacks and other things and watering practices and other stuff because most of your growth can be relying on you, especially, like I said, the bacteria aren't going to be moving as fast, so they're not going to be doing what they're doing. And so at that point, you need to start navigating the possibility of using 1,300 parts per million, 1,500 parts per million, up to even 1,800 parts per million. If you're stacking nutrients, you might even be working all the way up to 3,000 parts per million if you're doing it right. like I said, that goes the same with well water, river water, knowing your parts per million, understanding when parts per million begin to actually affect soil biology and their rate of growth and what makes them dormant. And then if your water is super high up in parts per million and you got to reduce it down, well, understanding that you might not need to get a super fancy RO system, right? You might be able to get away with using a less expensive RO system that maybe it doesn't clean the water all the way down to zero, but maybe it reduces your parts per million from 1,500 or 1,600 or whatever down to 500 parts per million, 400 parts per million. Add 1 ml per gallon, maybe 1.5 mLs per gallon of drops bounds because you have a little bit harder water. And then at that point, if you're using soil biology, you have about 300 parts per million, 400 parts per million of synthetic fertilizer you can use if you wanted to, if you're not using a dry amendment in your soil already. I'm a big fan of actually utilizing what's in your tap water. The key is about making all the toxins that they put in your tap water that screw up your soil biology, that screw up your plant, making those things inert. Once you do that, you can utilize any water source and adjust because, I mean, just think about it, guys. Just think about it. If let's say your tap water is coming out at 800 parts per million and you're able to treat that water to the point where the water is healthy and mineralized and you were able to give that to your outdoor plant where it didn't need any fertilizer. You didn't need to purchase any fertilizer whatsoever. I mean, just think about the amount of money you're saving. Just think about the amount of money farmers overall long-term would end up saving, you know. In that you have to think about what props up the fertilizer industry, and that's taking out your soil biology, taking out your workers that can literally convert anything it needs so that the plant will grow, especially as they've gotten down to the science about how many minerals and the mass, like the density mass of these minerals of what it actually takes to grow a plant is not much. So when you really think about that, the majority of the time, there's more than enough things that could be broken down in soil if the bacteria are going. And fertilizer companies understand what makes soil biology dormant and makes it non-functioning. So your plants rely on their products and services.